Okay, Eric, give us our Star Trek trivia.
Okay. This one might sound unusual to you guys, and I'll explain why in a second. But what is the name of Spock's hometown on Vulcan? Hometown on Vulcan. A. Shakhari. B. Vulcanopolis. C. Shikar. That's Shikahr. Or D. Vulcania.
Blah, Eric.
I don't feel like I've done anything.
Welcome to a piece of the action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And today we are continuing talking about some of the most popular board games. According to Boardgame Geek, today we're going to be looking at the game Puerto Rico. So, Puerto Rico, designed by Andreas Seyfarth, came out in 2002. Been around quite a long time, obviously, and I think for myself personally, I played it a long time ago, and even a long time ago, I remember it being around as sort of one of the most. It was like the #1 most popular game on BGG for a long time, was it not?
The highest ranked game on BGG for years.
Many years.
Right.
I'm surprised you played this. I didn't know you played this, Micah.
I did play it, and it shows how long ago it's been, because that was, 10, 12.
Well, we all know Micah's memory. He could be thinking about a game of Monopoly he had as a child.
I could be mistaking the fact that I can identify the words Puerto Rico as an object that exists in reality.
I saw it on a map one time. I think that means I played it.
That's true. Okay, so let's talk about Puerto Rico. You guys got together and played this several times. So let's begin with sort of a synopsis. What is Puerto Rico about? And Eric, why don't we go to you? You can lay it out for us.
Okay. Puerto Rico is about being the best governor of Puerto Rico sometime during its 400-year occupation by Spain. And it's a fairly straightforward, I want to say it's a fairly straightforward resource management mechanism, but it's really light on the resource management. Really, the reason this game shines is not because of that, but that's kind of like kind of a backbone for it. You use those resources to basically make money, purchase buildings, and ship goods. Those are the three major things you're trying to do through the game. And but what really makes Puerto Rico special is it has a very interesting role selection. At the beginning of every turn, you're going to choose a role, and that role will give you, not just you, will give everyone at the table an ability to do a certain type of action. But if you choose the role, if you're the guy who chooses the role, you get a special bonus.
Okay. All right. So, Greg, you cover everything as far as synopsis goes? Okay,
Sounds
great.
good.
All right. So then let's talk about the theme of Puerto Rico. How did the elements enforce and back up or contribute to its theme? What do you guys think? Eric?
Yeah, kind of. So you have a board in front of you, and the board, this is going to come back to the board for me always whenever we talk about theme. It's visual components that are important to me. When we're talking about any kind of civilization game, I need to see a map, otherwise I don't feel like I'm doing anything. So having something in front of you that represents something, to me, is important. When it comes to theme. So you've got a board in front of you. It represents the island of Puerto Rico and the city of San Juan. Buildings get placed in a grid within the portion of the board, and then plantations go somewhere else. And then you've got 3 ships that have limited space. These are shared by the players. All of these things basically add up to a feeling, add to the theme of Puerto Rico. But that theme is a very high level, and I would call it very blurry depiction of what it might have felt like to govern Puerto Rico. I think if people have been following our other videos, this would fall, as far as theme goes, it would fall somewhat a little bit higher than Pandemic and below Agricola.
Okay. All right. So still somewhat more thematic than a lot of the games we've considered thus far, you'd say.
Yes, definitely.
Greg, what about you? What do you think?
I guess kind of there's this feeling you're running some sort of business. I mean, Eric says you're the governor, but that's a role that actually changes from player to player. I could never pin who you actually are in this game, to be honest with you. And I feel the theme could be near about anything because the buildings go into a grid, plantations go into a grid. You take a colonist and put them into that, and they become activated. To me, they could just be like, they're like components in a machine, and you put batteries in them. That to me is what they are. So the theme's pretty minimal to me. Of course, Eric is more sensitive to themes than I am, but I don't get any theme out of this game at all.
Didn't you see the board though? I mean, all the pieces.
Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, this is a very blurry theme to me. It is very. I didn't want to blow it off. I actually struggled with this because I didn't. There is a theme there, but it was overshadowed, and I think that we're going to talk about why that is in later portions of the video. But there is a theme, but it's not strong.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say this about Puerto Rico's theme. It's funny because in the Agricola video I talked about, that was my first kind of heavier Euro that really got me into board gaming as a serious hobby. It's funny because years before Agricola, it was actually when Micah and I were rooming together with Lauren. I thought, hey, it'd be a good idea to go buy a board game that we could play. And I remember going and finding BGG, and Puerto Rico was the #1 game for a long time. I says, well, okay, let's get the #1 game. And I remember looking at it and reading it. And back then I'm like, what? You're producing indigo and selling it? That just sounds so boring. I remember thinking that. It is not, if it's not a grab you theme. But the idea that it's Puerto Rico, nothing about this feels like it has to be Puerto Rico. It could be literally any time or place in history or the future. So there's that.
Yeah, this could easily be building your star base or something like that.
Yeah.
There's even ships already in the game. It'd be an easy port.
There you go. All right.
It did. It's called Race for the Galaxy.
Yeah, right.
Which I think we definitely will get to at some point.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, well then, the theme aside, apart from that, let's talk about what it felt like to play. How did it feel to play Puerto Rico? Greg?
Yeah, so here, I think Eric spot on when he says that role selection mechanism is the heart of Puerto Rico. And I've been thinking about that role selection. That's if Puerto Rico didn't invent that concept of, I take a role, then everyone gets that action, but I get a privilege for taking that action. If Puerto Rico didn't invent that, it popularized it. It's a big part of the game. So I was thinking of what feel that gives you. It's not that different than an action selection mechanism or drafting mechanism like a worker placement.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, in a way, because it's like worker placement is, like in Agricola, you take the action, you do the action, but no one else gets to take it. But with role selection is I take the action, I do the action, but I'm letting everyone else take the action, which in a way softens that mechanic a little bit because I'm not denying you that action, I'm giving you the action. So what that creates in the game is this idea of timing. Because ideally, I want to take the action and make that action the worst for everyone else. So there's a whole idea about timing is like, okay, if I take this action now, how is it going to benefit everybody else? So it's more about like picking the right role at the right time that will benefit you and not benefit other people. So to me, that's a main aspect of Puerto Rico. The feel of it is the timing, is picking that role at the right time.
Does the fact that timing factors in like that, does that create a tension or a pressure? Are you like in a hurry, therefore? Is that how you feel, or is it just...
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think Puerto Rico has a feeling of a race to things because there are other resources that are shared among the players. But there's a role of plantations, there's buildings particularly that you're going to want. So there's the idea of racing towards the buildings that you want to get before the other players. There is that. But it's more like, for example, man, I really want to ship. But if I ship right now, it's going to benefit everybody. Or I want to trade, it's going to benefit everybody. But you think about it, it's like, well, if I want to trade, and I know Sue over there wants to trade, why do I take that as my action now? I'll just let her take that. When she takes it, I'm going to be benefited by it. Anyway, so that's the whole dilemma in your head when you're playing is, which roles do I take that benefit me, hurt others? Because I know eventually someone's going to take this role. If Sue takes it, will that benefit me? I have to work out the player count, and figure that out. That's the decision-making space I see in this game.
Okay. All right. Anything else as far as theme? Or does that cover it for you? Or
It's
not
good
theme,
for
but feel? Yeah.
Nope,
No,
I think
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
that covers
Eric?
it. Yeah, as far as the feel is concerned, that covers it for me.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's go on to talk about the strategy or some of the more crunchy considerations. What are you thinking about to try to win as you're playing? Eric, you want to start off?
Sure. Greg talked about some of the important things to think about already, but when I was thinking about this, I've got 2 levels of advice for people, and my first level is play it, and if this is your jam, then scour the strategy forums on BGG, watch a bunch of actual play videos on YouTube, and play a ton of this game, because this game, it's like a delicate ecosystem. And if one single indigo plant dies alone in the forest, then the entire world of Puerto Rico will play differently. Bad choices that are made, even by any of the players, not by you, by any of the players, changes what it means to make a good choice. So the whole game is like on a knife's edge. So you need to study. If this is your thing, I'm saying you need to study to figure out how the game mutates based on various board states. Okay, if you're just playing this casually, then it's harder for me to answer that question because it's such a complex game. I think that Greg did a good job of mentioning some of the important points. I've got 4 general massive grain of salt suggestions for people. First, try to get at least a couple of buildings up and running that can serve as regular sources of income. Do that pretty early on. Your income should be a big priority up front. 2, remember that quarries are pretty much better than any other type of plantation, but if you're only focused on quarries, you're not going to have any actual goods to sell or to ship. So remember that quarries are really valuable, but don't just go quarries, because then you won't be able to make any VP. And Greg already kind of touched on this, but the third point would be to look at other people's boards. And is there a role that they can't benefit from? For instance, if nobody else has any money, they're probably not going to be able to make much use of the builder action. So it becomes more valuable for you if that's the case. If there's a particular number of colonists on the colony ship that will allow you to get more colonist tokens than anyone else, then that action is slightly more valuable for you. So optimizing your turns is a really important part of the game. And then after that, the fourth thing is try to think of, once you've got income under control, try to figure out some way to use the buildings that are available, because Greg mentioned that this is a race and some of the buildings are not going to be available for you. Find a way to get a good combo where you can use the buildings that are available to make some VP. Think about combinations like Corn, Harbor, and Wharf, for instance, or like the one I used was Construction Hut, University, and Fortress combo. And I know that by saying that, those are not the optimal strategies, but remember, I'm talking to people who are just playing this for fun.
You think University is good? Blah, Eric.
I know, no, it is. Like, seriously. But I'm talking to people who just like those particular buildings, they do dovetail nicely with one another, but I know it's not optimal. I know
these are just
like
intro level casual strategies.
Again, I'm talking to people who just want to play and have fun and don't want to get
So sum it up for me again. What are the 4, real quick?
try to get a couple of buildings up and running that can serve as income. Focus on your income. You need at least a couple of sources of income. You need to remember that quarries are very important. You need to pay attention to other people's boards and try to choose roles that they will not benefit from as much as you, and then try to find a way to get income get VP in the latter half of the game. Things like good combos that will allow you to ship a lot, or good combos that will allow you to build a lot of buildings quickly. Those are your two main sources of VP, because ultimately in the end of the game, VP can only come from buildings, occupied bonus buildings, or shipping goods. So you need to keep your eye on the ball in the latter half of the game as far as VP is concerned.
Okay. Greg, what do you think? You want to shoot down all those strategies?
No, actually, those were almost point for point a lot of what I was going to talk about there. I agree. I think the first, and the reason why Eric is being so hesitant here is because walking into Puerto Rico strategy waters can be a dangerous endeavor. I think out of all the games that we have discussed up to this point, Puerto Rico has the most active community around it of people who will say this is the right play to play Puerto Rico. It's a game that has opening strategies like you definitely take this. If you're first player, you definitely take this as second player. So, I mean, if you want strategy tips, there's an unending amount of it on the internet. But I think basic overview, I agree. I think the first half of your game should be focused on income. Quarries, markets, things that help you trade, things of that nature. And I think me and Eric played this a couple times over the course of the week, but I lost the first game because I forgot about that, about the income thing. I just I want to make VP, and I forgot about getting my income going in the beginning. So I lost my first game, and I won the second one because I think I remembered doing that. So avoid the allure of trying to get big VP in the beginning. I think just get your economy going. Another thing is I feel new players tend to underestimate corn for some reason, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think it's because it gives you no money for trading, but corn produces without a building. Like most of the building, like if I have an indigo plantation, I need an indigo factory, and they both have to be manned in order for me to actually make indigo. But corn, I just have to have a manned corn plantation, and it makes corn, and then I can ship that for the same amount of VP you ship something more expensive like coffee for. So don't underestimate corn plantations. Those are good, especially in the early game. I feel those.
Yeah. If you can get a wharf, that's why I mentioned that. Like if you can get
Yeah.
a wharf, which gives you your own ship to ship on, and you're just pumping corn into it, that's a good source of VP in the latter half of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I agree also with him looking at other players' boards, because a lot of games we talked about, and I think this is true here too. There's lanes that you can find to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And that will change from game to game depending on what people are doing. So trying to find, do I want to go with this building focus strategy? Do I want to go heavy in the coffee and just make a ton of money? Do I want to go heavy in the corn? Those are, you can find what people are not taking and trying to slot yourself into that lane is a good idea. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously very high level beginner strategies, but that's what I would recommend.
Let me ask you, do you agree with Eric that his idea that there's sort of this, super complex ecosystem going on where little tiny things ripple out in kind of unpredictable ways?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost, aside from the plantations that come out, it's a perfect information game. There's no dice roll, there's no randomness. Everything is known. But just like a lot of perfect information games, after the first few moves, the decision tree just becomes so, what do you call that? Leafy, branchy? What do you call that?
Yeah, it becomes so extensive that it's right. It becomes so extensive that
yeah,
it's perfect information.
I thought bushy.
But not in actuality, right? You can't.
Yeah, I think that it branches off to so many different ways that I agree that it is there's a ripple effect for sure. There's a whole like butterfly effect where one move will just change the whole game.
So given that that's the case, do you feel like because you've talked about sort of wanting to get feedback for your moves, how do you know in such a complicated scenario whether the move you've made is good or bad, or is it hard to tell?
No, I think you may not get. How do I rephrase this? It's you'll know by the score at the end of the game.
Okay.
How you did.
Eventually.
I actually disagree with that. Go ahead, finish your thought, but I want to come back to that.
I think you know because you can get into a position that's just not beneficial for you pretty quickly. I mean, if I choose a role that's not the right role, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I made 2 points off of that, and Jim over there made 5. Well, that's direct feedback, right?
Okay.
I mean, you can't. This is a good thing, right?
Okay.
The many branching paths is a fantastic thing. Otherwise, why not? Why are you playing the game for me? So I don't think those. I guess maybe I'm confused a little bit because I don't feel those are correlated. The idea that the game is multiple decisions versus getting direct feedback, I don't think that is related to each other. I think this game gives enough feedback into your decisions that I'm content with it. Because it's perfect information, I can directly and clearly see what decisions led me down the wrong path.
Okay.
It's very obvious at the end of the game what I did wrong. And I always come back to the end of this game going, okay, next time I play, I know not to do this. I know to change this. Like I said, the first game I played with Eric this week, because I hadn't played in a while, I didn't focus on my economy in the beginning. Well, at the end of the game, I clearly knew that was why I lost. Right? It was very obvious to me that's why I lost. So I could use that input to help me manage my next game. So.
Okay. So you don't feel like there's a correlation. Eric, what were you going to say?
No, I think that. So, one thing that people should know about me is I have a problem with sequences. Sequencing has always been something that, like, I still have to sing the alphabet song. It's that level. So, sometimes for me, seeing cause and effect, maybe it's harder for me than other people. I don't know, but I didn't get the feeling that I knew from within the framework of a single game why I particularly what bad choices I had made. And in fact, I think, and from reading a little bit about this game, I think that if you're playing with weaker players, bad choices can actually become good choices, which is what I was talking about with, like, the whole ecosystem can change. Like, bad, quote unquote, bad choices can totally change the ramification of a strong player's strategy. And
I agree with that 100%.
So I don't know. I not without me personally, not without playing a ton of games and doing a lot of research, I wouldn't necessarily know that, buying the tobacco factory or the coffee factory or whatever is a bad move now. That's very hard for me to parse, and maybe it's not that case with geniuses like Greg.
Sure.
No, I agree with what Eric is saying. This will come up again later on. So
Yeah,
we'll come back to this topic.
All right, well, fair enough. So, let's go on then to talk about the good and the bad. First of all, what did Puerto Rico do well? Eric.
Well, Puerto Rico is a really clever game. It is a smart, ingenious, thought-provoking game. And if that's your thing, if you are into hard-fought games to play, dense games, this could potentially be the only game you ever need to buy. It's got a lot of replayability. It's very, it's like an onion. It's going to take a lot of. It's got a lot there. There's a lot of meat on the bone. But more than that, there's one thing in particular that I think this game shines at, and that is player interaction. We've been complaining for weeks now, pretty much ever since Catan. We don't have. We're trying to get another competitive game that isn't effectively multiplayer solitaire, and this is it. So this is about as much interaction as you could hope for outside of, like, a war game or a real-time trading game or Captain Sonar. You know, it's the interaction is infused into this game on a couple of different levels. You've got, like I said before, with the taking of roles, making sure that the roles that you take are more efficient for you than they are for everyone else, and the fact that when you take a role, everyone else gets to use it as well. So there's no downtime. You're constantly interested in what everyone else is doing, looking at what other players have available. And then the second layer of interaction comes in with the jockeying for purchases and placements in the shared part of the game. So ships, trading houses, and building, and the stacks of buildings. You want to get an engine going that lets you win, but everyone is drawing from that same shared supply, and so the competition is really fierce.
Okay, let's go ahead. Greg, what about you? What did Puerto Rico do well?
So I've been trying to think about how to describe Puerto Rico, and I've come up with a beer analogy.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right, which is another hobby of mine. But I think it'll make sense.
Making analogies.
That's right, making analogies. But I think even if you don't drink beer, this will make sense. For me, there's sometimes when you sit down, you want a beer. You want something big and in your face, like an imperial stout or a Belgian quad or a sour ale or a barley wine, something that's just going to smack you in the taste buds, right? And those are always ones that are memorable. But then there's sometimes you just want something more subtle. Maybe you want a Saison or a Pilsner. And those are impressive in their own right, because while they don't have very bold flavors, the balance can be impressive. How they get this smell to be just perfect is all very low key. If in the food world, you could say there's sometimes you want spicy Indian curry, sometimes you want to go out for sashimi, right? I mean, they're both impressive in their own way. One's more in your face, one's more subtle. For me, Puerto Rico is the latter of those. There's nothing in Puerto Rico that just like grabs me by the head and shakes and says, "Notice me, notice this thing." It's just a very subtle, balanced game, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that every time I sit down and play Puerto Rico, and I don't play it that much, it'll be months, sometimes years between plays, and every time I sit down and play it, I go, "Man, I need to play this more. This is a good game," and then I'll not play it again for months. It's just got that vibe to it. But I do like it every time I play. It also has Joel Eddy over in Drive Thru Reviews sometimes uses the phrase that Euro hum.
Mm-hmm.
And if that makes sense to you, I don't know if I can describe it, but it's that feeling you get when everything is just clicking just right. It's just this fine, well-oiled machine. The gears are just moving just right, and you get that little buzz in your head. This game has that a lot. And it's interesting how it does it. There's a balance here. There's almost a dichotomy in a lot of ways. I agree with Eric. There is a lot of player interaction in this game. I don't know that I would say it's one of the highest. Maybe amongst the highest that we've reviewed so far, but
That's all I'm talking about. Yeah,
okay, then I agree. It probably is. I put Agricola a little around there too, but it does have a lot of player interaction for sure, but it's very indirect player interaction. You're not directly targeting people's engines. It's not very conflict driven. I feel it's very indirect. So therefore, even though it's high player interaction, it never feels mean. It never feels spiteful. So that's a neat little balance I think it pulls off. It is medium weight, medium heavy-ish maybe, but it's not difficult to teach. But once you teach those roles, you're done. You taught the whole game. And here's the other part of Puerto Rico that I like. It's a thinky game. It's a very thinky game. It's deep, as shown by how many people play this pretty seriously. But it never feels overwhelming. And I think it does this because it takes ideas and it breaks it down to very small bits. When it's on your turn and someone picked the one where you click plantation, all you got to do is pick one plantation of ones that are available. That's it. That's all you're doing. Someone picks, I think it's mayor, where you get the colonist. Okay, I have 2 colonists. Which buildings do I put them in? It's each decision, and sometimes the decisions is made for you when it gets to your turn. So there's a lot of decisions I think it does that by taking the big ideas and breaking them down to very, very small decisions. So no one single decision just feels overwhelming. I don't think. Maybe if you're the first player and you got all the roles to select, but that's a big one. But a lot of your decisions are just very tiny. So I like how it breaks it down to bite-sized chunks, and it's just through the accumulation of all these decisions that makes it a deep game. So that also leads to being quick turns. I like that in this game. The turns fly by. Once it's turn, you're also on turn because you get to do what they do. It's near perfect information. I like that about games. I also like about Puerto Rico that the players are responsible for choosing the game to end. It's not like a timer that just ends. It's like the players have, like when all the colonists go away or all the someone builds all their buildings, the game will end there. So it's kind of a player-driven.
Good point. I didn't think about that. That's unlike Agricola, where it just ends after 14 turns. There's more control on the player's part. That is a good point.
Yeah, I like that. I like it when players can decide, should I end the game now? Am I ahead? Am I winning? They do have the whole hidden trackable information about victory points that I'm not a huge fan of, but so you don't always know when you can end the game or not. But if you kept track of that, you can end the game when it's your. Hopefully, the person that ends the game is also winning the game. That's the idea. But some people miscalculate that.
Yeah, Eric miscalculated that last time.
Would you say is this a heavier game than Agricola, weight-wise?
I don't think
it's
so.
about the same.
I don't agree with that. I think Agricola's. I think this is. It's. I mean, when you say heavy weight-wise, that's a very fuzzy definition people give it. But generally, I think the consensus is it's the weight of the rules that you have to consider versus the depth of the game. Those things put together create a heavy game. I think in Agricola, the turns are a little more. I'm not saying Agricola is a massively heavy game, but it's. I think the decision-making space is a little more overwhelming. There's more going on in a turn of Agricola that you have to consider. Whereas Puerto Rico, because I said it breaks down to bite-sized chunks, I never get that overwhelming feel in Puerto Rico. It's deep game, but I never feel it's branching out too far. And here's the other thing with Puerto Rico. It's interesting. You can play this multiplayer solitaire. If you wanted to, you'd lose the game for sure. But you could just play your board, pick the roles that match what you want to do, and not even concern yourself with how it's going to affect other players. Mm-hmm. You could do that, but I think with Agricola, because of the cards and all the spaces on the board, I think there's just more to consider. So I mean, for me, Puerto Rico's a little closer to midweight than Agricola is, but it's not crazy different.
Okay. All right, so that covers the good. Now let's talk about the bad. What did Puerto Rico not do well? Greg?
Yeah, so all that talk about it being a very subtle and a nuanced game, I do like that. But at the end of the day, I like my games to be a little more sharper edged. That's what it boils down to me. I do like games that are have something about them that's very standout and noticeable. So that's probably why I don't think about playing Puerto Rico that often.
You like the Imperial Stouts? Yes,
I do, and even in beers, I like that. I just want something that's going to be very noticeable. And I think when Puerto Rico first came out, it was more noticeable because there weren't a lot of games like that. But in today's market, you need something more that's going to stand out. And I like my interaction to be a little more direct, be a little more integrated than just timing issues and race issues. So that's kind of where I'm in with that. Another thing with Puerto Rico, and this gets brought up a lot in Puerto Rico reviews, and Eric touched on this, and that you have to be aware that Puerto Rico has this issue with what's known as right-left binding. And what that means is if you have, let's say, 3 experienced players and 1 new player who doesn't know what they're doing, the person that's sitting to the left of that new player is going to have a distinct advantage. Because the new player doesn't know the strategic language that's been built up in this game. And they're going to make dumb decisions that advantage people. And if you're sitting to the left of that, like it's like in poker's the same way, right? It's like if you're sitting to the left of that person, you can take advantage of their blunders. And Puerto Rico is an older game where that turn order never changes. It just goes in this clockwise order every single turn and never changes. A lot of newer games which I like, make turn order something you fight for. So yeah, that's something to think about. If you're going to have mixed levels of expertise, and Puerto Rico really exaggerates that, I feel, because it's such a deeper game, then yeah, you're going to have issues with how seating arrangements are. Other than that, there's a few smaller things. Setup can be a little long. You do have to consider it. It's just because there's ways to get around that. Also, because of the big community around this game, there are like scripted openings.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of, how do you feel about that or not? It's up to you. But there are like, these are clearly the best few turns. So there does exist there.
By scripted opening, you mean that there are some established
Best practices
for opening.
It's like because it's a perfect information game, or nearly so. There's a certain, you take this roll and then you take this. You take this roll, then the second player takes this roll and takes this. So there's those kind of ideas. Now it breaks out of that pretty soon, but I'm not saying it's a horrible thing. Just something to be aware of. And finally, and this is a big one that kind of comes up in every Puerto Rico review. I think Eric's going to touch on this a little more, but in the theming wise, the game does call these little discs colonists. But if you know anything about the history of Puerto Rico, most likely they were slaves. Now, even thematically, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, though, because you are putting these discs in things like universities and offices, in addition to plantations. So my feeling is the theme in this game is so abstracted that it never at all comes up in my mind that way. And the game does say they're colonists, and that could be a negative to you or not. That's up to you. But I will say that because of that, there are certain issues that some people may be more sensitive to that to others. So you have to, and rightly so. So you have to think about how people are going to react to that idea, depending on how much they know their history, how much that affects them. So that's just a little niggle. And I think that's not going to age very well, to be super honest with you, this idea. So it's just another thing to think about. I feel it's pretty abstracted out. But obviously, everyone's going to be different on that. But it is worth mentioning.
Be aware that it's an element in there that you may want to grapple with it in some way.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Does that cover the negatives for you?
That covers the negatives.
Okay. Eric, what about you? What do you feel Puerto Rico could have done better?
Yeah. I think in some ways I'm going to be restating a couple of things that Greg said, so I'll just kind of move quickly through them. I agree with Greg's points. I was going to make the comment that I was going to comment on the kind of the public service announcement thing about just what Greg just talked about, and just kind of basically say the exact same thing, that if you know your history, then you know that these were most likely, the occupation of Puerto Rico was not actually in real life a peaceful Eurogame style endeavor.
Right.
And so the game calls them colonists. They were almost assuredly slaves, some local, most from Africa. There's a lot of information on this on YouTube, so if you want this discussed further, and if you want more information on how that kind of unpacks Puerto Rico's treatment of Spain's occupation, there's plenty of stuff out there, but just know that it exists. That's all I wanted to say. And then as far as the negatives of the actual game go, we've talked a little bit about Agricola, and I couldn't help but compare this game to Agricola as I was playing it. You're both kind of a medium-heavy Euro. It's all about efficiency of turns. They have a certain, although I think this one, Puerto Rico, has more of an economic feel. I think that they both kind of have an economic vibe to them. But unfortunately, Puerto Rico's focus on complex interaction of all of its moving parts, all the moving parts of the game, kind of completely overwhelm any casual enjoyment that I got from playing the game. So where Agricola on one hand was able to balance this kind of availability and transparent fun, with on the other hand, a dense and well-constructed game, the game mechanics, Puerto Rico seems to have like focused entirely on producing a game experience that is all about obscurity. Now that might be my sequencing problem or my difficulty of grokking stuff like that.
The way that the
But
middle of the alphabet is fairly obscure.
that's exactly right. Yes. But if you like the process of unpacking Puerto Rico's complexity, if that's what you want from a board game, then this is for you. But for my tastes, it's a little too demanding for what I'm willing to give it. So because this game is all about balance, and we've talked about how it's built on this knife's edge, right? And I know that there's people who are into that kind of thing. And Greg talked about the community that is around this game. It's pretty intense, you know. There's tournaments. It's the game itself has gotten so much bigger than the actual designer because they've changed the rules of the game effectively. People have mathed out, and I know at least in one instance they created an AI to run games of this to try to find balance issues. You know, there's a so in that sense they've found more balanced rules. They've found official variants to the game. I know, which all of that is a testament to its great design. But for my money, that hyper focus on the balance of the gameplay, which one could argue if changes have been made, they didn't get it right in the first place. It detracts from the fun of the game, and that fun only really comes back when everyone at the table is able to play at a very high level and takes it very seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I want to agree with that. I didn't mention that, but I do agree that Puerto Rico is it's definitely more subtle and more opaque than something like Agricola. And that's what I mean by you could come onto this game and play just 100% multiplayer solitaire and do horrible at this game. But getting your mind to think about how to play this game well, I do believe does take a few more plays than something like Agricola does.
And I liked your terminology there, Greg, when you said that you prefer your games with like a sharper edge to it. That's a good way of putting it, because this is why I struggled talking about the theme, because the theme is there, it exists. I feel like it's like many of the games we've played, it could be anything, but the theme, there's enough theme there. But honestly, playing through the game, it just felt like the mechanics completely overshadowed any kind of fun factor that I got from the game. With Agricola, like I said in our review, you can kind of just have fun with it. You might not win, but at the end you're going to have a farm. You know, it's going to feel like you've been farming. At the end of Puerto Rico, I don't feel like, if I've lost, I don't feel like I've done anything. It's not like I feel like I've just purchased the wrong tokens off of a board, and it doesn't feel like, unlike Agricola, it doesn't feel like I'm actually governing Puerto Rico in any sense of the term.
Well, sure, and that's an interesting point to bring up too, because I think what you're saying is in Agricola, even if you lose, you have a farm to look at. You've done something. But in Puerto Rico, you could go the whole game without really doing much of anything, because it doesn't have that arc to it, I guess. It's just the number of victory points that you've collected by the end of the game at the end of the day. So that's not as satisfying as of a loss as is, okay, well, I didn't win Agricola, but hey, look, I built up all these pigs. You know, there's something that you can feel an accomplishment in, I guess.
Right.
I can see that.
Is it the case with Agricola, or should I say, can you get totally destroyed at Puerto Rico? I mean, can you just get blown out of the water?
Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so let's then wrap it up. Let's give you guys want to give your final thoughts. Anything about Puerto Rico you want to say you have not said, and would you recommend it, Eric?
I would recommend it to if your idea of fun, or if the idea of spending hours learning exactly why buying a hacienda on turn 3 in a 4-player game is only worth 0.7 doubloons. If that's your idea of fun, then Puerto Rico is the historically problematic game for you.
Okay. All right. Greg, what about you? Final thoughts, and would you recommend it?
Yeah, so I was debating back and forth about what to rate Puerto Rico, and I was kind of fluctuating between a 7.5, which is a game that I'm always willing to play if someone wants to, and an 8 is getting to the lower level of a game that I would actually get a group together to play. And I feel that if I have to fight for the higher value, then I'll keep it at the lower one. So I'm gonna rate this a 7.5. Pretty much for what I've mentioned. I feel there's other games out there that can fill this to me now that are improved, coupled with a problematic theme. It's a game that I have no real desire to own. Probably will never own. I don't own it. So it's that's kind of where I'm at on it. It's a fine game. I enjoy it. It clicks. But I think it's been surpassed. And in particular, that particular role selection mechanism, I feel has been improved on in other games. And we'll get to those eventually too. So that's where I'm at.
All right. So those are our thoughts then on Puerto Rico. And sounds like definitely, sort of some mixed feelings from you guys on whether or not you would actually recommend having people play it or not. But it has certainly been around for a long time. Probably a game that you will hear referenced a lot. Good idea to know sort of what it's all about. So
no, it's a solid game. Let's be clear here. I don't want to come across as mixed feelings. I think it's a solid game. You should play it. 7.5 is pretty good. So
you should play it. Maybe you shouldn't own it, but you should play it if you haven't played it.
Test the waters with it, yes.
Right. Okay. All right. So that is, though, for better or worse, going to go on to our 10-game shelf. That's going to be game number 9. And our next game is going to complete filling up that shelf. What is our next game going to be?
King of Tokyo.
King of Tokyo. So we'll look forward to that. And then after we're done with that, we're going to get to the fun part where we start to start kicking games off the shelf. So
I think we all know what's coming.
But look forward to King of Tokyo. Give us your thoughts on Puerto Rico. If you've played it, what you think. And until then, this has been a piece of the action.
Please tell me it's not B or D.
I don't know. I have no idea. This is an unusual question because it comes from the animated series.
Oh, so this is going to be the was the one when he's a kid?
Yeah.
Yesteryear?
So it could be corny because if you've watched all those.
Tell us the.
I watched that one.
Shakari, Volcanopolis, Shikar, or Volcania.
I'm gonna go with Shikar. I think Shakari. That sounds familiar. That feels like some Vulcan ritual.
Yeah, Shakari. That I think so. Yeah, that's definitely something from the actual series.
Yeah. So, and I'm hoping it's not B or D.
Gosh,
so I'm gonna go with C.
If it's in a cartoon, doesn't that increase the odds of it being?
Yeah, it does. Big time.
It probably does.
Okay, no, I'll go with Greg also though.
C, Shikar.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have no idea. I actually think it's going to be Volcania, but we'll see.
Probably.
We'll see. Oh no, it was Shikar.
Okay, good.
That's good.
Say, now
redeemed itself.
Now, as we come to you live from the city of Earthia.
Right. No, that was a good episode actually, but that was
the best.
They
of
did
the
some seriously
series.
Corny stuff. Yeah, it was.
But if
they did stuff
for those out there, if you don't watch animated series, if you watch one episode, watch that one. What's that one called? It's like Yesteryear or
it was called
Yesteryear.
Yeah, Yesteryear.
Because it gives like Spock's background.
Yeah, it was written by DC Fontana.
Yeah, that's right. She was good.
Yeah, she was.
It gives Spock's like a background, and they reused some of it in the Abrams movies, which
They do,
shall
with
not
the animal.
which shall not be mentioned.